You're gonna.
Good day, everyone. I'm Jeff. I'm a dedicated life and addiction coach. I'm thrilled to welcome you to our Soulful Recovery video series. My journey into this world is not just a professional pursuit, it's a deeply personal commitment. I have witnessed the transformative power of compassionate support and effective strategies in overcoming addiction. I'm here to share insights, foster understanding, and offer hope. Our goal in this series is to enlighten, inspire, and empower those on their recovery journey. We aim to provide not just knowledge, but a sense of community and a reminder that no one has to walk this path alone. So let's embark on this journey together and open our hearts and minds as we welcome Dr. Linda Hancock to share her invaluable wisdom with us today. Linda Hancock was born and raised in the prairie town of Indian Head, Saskatchewan, Canada. Following high school graduation, she worked in various administrative positions and was an extremely active mother of 3 children. Linda earned degrees in art, social work, education, and psychology to the doctorate level. As she says, she had to spend her time and money on something because she doesn't golf. As a registered psychologist and registered social worker, Dr. Hancock helps individuals, groups, organizations, and communities to problem solve and reach their potential. She's a trained mediator who has worked as a child welfare case manager and investigator, mental health consultant, and educator teaching in college and university settings. Her professional career has spanned the fields of justice, health, and education. Linda is a communicator. She speaks professionally and serves as a consultant for media personalities and is also a published writer and newspaper columnist. She has given presentations at annual meetings, fundraising, dinners, and community events for professionals, businesses, students, and school personnel. She's also prepared and provided workshops for organizations and groups across North America and the Caribbean. One of Linda's most requested keynote addresses is Life is an Adventure Every Step of the Way, in which she combines her personal experiences, extensive work history, and academic training into a hilarious but thought provoking message. Its popularity has led to a book by the same name. Through the years, Linda has served as a volunteer on several local, provincial, and national committees and boards. Linda is also a musician who treasures every moment that she can share with her grandchildren. In fact, she recently moved her private practice to Western Village in Calgary in order to be closer to a couple of them. Even though Linda has served over 8,000 clients, she has a special place in her heart for veterans and her caseload now primarily consists of Canadian and British soldiers and veterans. She particularly likes to help them with diagnosis, disability, tax credit applications, and the other paperwork they tend to avoid or dislike. In addition, Linda is a provider for the United States Veterans Evaluation Service, which requires her review of military files, confirmation of diagnoses, as well as the links to service. In the spring of 2023, Linda expanded her business by becoming a member of the Saskatchewan College of Psychologists, so she can now work with clients in 2 provinces. Most of her contact with clients is through the secure Jane, Jane, virtual software platform. Most recently, Linda has been honored to have been nominated for the Canadian Business Awards of 2024. To learn more about Dr. Linda and access over 12,000 of her published articles, please visit her website, www.lindahancock.com.
Good morning, Jeff. Thank
Good
you for
morning,
having
Linda.
me here today.
Thank you for being here with me today. Would you introduce yourself and your history? Tell us why this mission to help individuals in their journey to recovery is important to you, resonates with you.
Well, Jeff, I was raised in a small rural community, and I had a family who really cared about and wanted to help other people. My mom was a school teacher, and they called her Queen of the Blackboard. She taught 3 generations of people. My dad was a credit union manager. And I know there are people in that town that said they wouldn't have a business today if it wasn't that Dad believed in them. So it was a little bit different back then. My uncle was a judge for the Court of Queen's Bench. We had a family of hardworking people, and we believed that every single person is special. I know there are people that walk around on earth today and they say, I'm special, I'm special. Well, we believed everybody is special. But we also believe that life has challenges, and often we face those challenges. And we need to help other people because they need to help us when we're in trouble. And I know over the years I've struggled many, many times. And I've had a good support group that have come in and they've given back to me because they were blessed. And so now I feel that I've been blessed and I need to give back to others. And it's a cycle that goes around and around and brings good. So that's kind of my background.
Thank you. What leads you to work helping men and women with addiction find freedom and purpose as they learn to abandon the addiction so they can move forward towards happiness and prosperity?
Well, I think, Jeff, that society tends to treat addiction like it's a problem. And I often treat it like it's a result. The core of it starts way before the addiction starts. When we have problems and we don't know how to cope, sometimes we're just looking for a quick solution, a temporary fix. And so we might grab something that isn't really a good choice, but it sort of calms us down or takes the pain away or does something that is just temporary. And the person that gets stressed wants to resolve the problem quickly or avoid it. Just get rid of it. And so everybody in life, I believe, wants success. They want identity. They want a purpose. But then what happens is they start using substances or doing addictive behaviors, and that makes us look and feel like we're failures. So the first problem is that we don't know how to cope. And then the result is we can form an addiction. So now we have two problems. We started out with one. Now society looks at it and they say, but the addiction's the problem. If we just take the alcohol away, it'll be fine. No, it's not, because you haven't solved the first problem, learning how to cope with the problem. So I think that you have to remember that we are not failures. As people, we are not failures. We're just people who sometimes make really poor choices. And I think that if we can help men and women to learn new skills, to build some healthy relationships, to engage in adequate support networks, and to recognize their own value, well, then everybody benefits. The individual benefits, the family benefits, and all of society benefits.
I agree. I agree completely. I like that about coping. What is one habit people can introduce today to help them work towards sobriety?
Well, I think everybody's goal should be to try to have a good day. Sometimes we get so caught in the past and we say, oh, but that happened and that happened. And we're beating ourselves up and saying, we did this wrong and we did that wrong. Or then we're going forward to the future and we're saying, but what if? But what if that? What if? And we're making up all kinds of stuff in our head that hasn't even happened yet. So sometimes if you're focusing on the past, you can become depressed because you don't have the opportunity or the ability anymore to fix it. And if you're thinking about the future, you certainly don't have control because we don't know what's coming around the corner. So I try to teach people to have a good day, to focus just on today. And if you make that determined effort that you're just going to take your waking hours and just do some good choices. So most of us find self-care very boring and we want to ignore it. We've all heard things over and over and over again about what we're supposed to do. But it's not the knowing. Knowing isn't enough. It's the doing. And so what I do is I try to tell people to think about your vehicle. What do you think would happen if all of a sudden you just threw sugar in the gas tank and you never changed the oil, right? And you never even bothered to ever wash or wax it? Well, other people would look at your vehicle and they'd say, well, that doesn't have much value. How far do you think you'd get if you just had sugar in the gas tank? And how do you think people would view you or you'd view yourself if you never did a wash and wax job? So I believe that what you need to do is treat yourself as well as, if not better than, your vehicle. So you start by getting out of bed in the morning, and then you make the bed. Okay? Then you make the bed, and then you practice good hygiene. So you don't, just wander around and not have your shower till later. You go in and you have your shower and you get all cleaned up, and then you dress up for you. You see, you don't dress up for some guy. You don't dress up to impress people. You dress up for you because when you dress up, you walk a little taller and you feel a little smarter. And so then you start eating regular nutritious meals because you need to put that good stuff in there to fire your brain. You need to drink lots of water, not coffee and juice and that water. We're 80% water. So that means we need to recycle all the time, every day, drink lots of water. You need to limit lots of things. You need to limit your caffeine intake, limit your sugar intake, and most of all, I'm going to say something that'll probably surprise you, limit your media intake. You see, when I grew up, we would listen to the news and it would be 10 or 20 minutes of fact. Now it's 24 hours of opinion. And so that cycle goes day and night and day and day. It goes on and on and on, 24 hours, but it's opinion. Okay, we can't fix what's happening on another continent. In fact, I'm going to say something kind of tongue in cheek. I learned a lot of my history and my geography by watching where the wars were happening. I didn't even know where Afghanistan was until the U.S. invaded it. And when you're listening to media about all these wars that are going on and you know that you don't have any control and you can't fix them, you can become quite mentally overwhelmed. And I believe that's why you have to get up in the morning and make your bed. You cannot solve the problems of the world if your life is a mess. So don't try. There's a wonderful book that I read years and years ago. It's called Everything I Needed to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. And that book says, have a nap, have a snack, play with your friends, hold hands when you cross the street so you're safe, go to the bathroom, flush. See, that when in kindergarten, we know how to survive and we don't have as many problems because we just do the basics. We just do the self-care. And so you asked me one habit, have a good day. Make yourself determined that today is going to be a good day full of good choices.
I like that. Have a good day. I have like 6 habits I try and do every morning to do that self-care. And one of them for sure is to make sure I look in the mirror and that I look respectful to myself. If you could share one piece of your knowledge, what would it be?
Well, I want to tell you something I learned years and years and years ago. It's an acronym. And I don't know if you had this where you live, but we used to have a stop sign, kind of a stop sign, and it was an old-fashioned police officer with the blue uniform and the blue cap, and he would have his hand up like this. Okay, and it would say stop, okay? The acronym I want to bring up with you today and discuss with you is HALT, H-A-L-T. And each one of the letters of that word is a wonderful, special, magical way that we can be in touch with our own brains and our own bodies so that we don't just go on autopilot and do the old bad habits. So I'm going to go through it with you today if I could.
Yes, please.
So it's H-A-L-T. The H represents hunger. So the first thing you need to do is you need to say, am I hungry? Because I remember years ago, and I had a wonderful mentor, and I phoned her and I said, I don't know what's wrong with me today. I'm kind of off. And she said, oh, sweetheart, did you eat? And I went, I have 4 degrees and I forgot to eat. When you're hungry, sometimes you don't really pay attention to that. You just push it away. But if you go and make yourself something to eat, you feel better. So it's a simple solution, but first you have to be aware that it's the hunger that's bugging you, the hunger that's preventing you from reaching your potential. So the H is hungry. If you're hungry, feed yourself. Number 2 is angry. A is angry. And you know, anger can be really, really tricky. And over the years, I've had so many people that have been angry. And we have a lot of oil patch people here, big, strong guys, you know, and they'd come into the office and I'd say, do you realize that emotions come in tandem? And they'd say, what do you mean? I'd say, well, if you're angry, usually it's fired underneath by something else. And it's usually fear. I'm not afraid of anything. And I'd say, are you afraid maybe your wife doesn't respect you? And they'd say, you're damn right she doesn't. And I found that the more angry the person became, the more fear they had. But they didn't want to admit that they were afraid. So if you're angry, you need to figure out, what am I afraid of? What's going on in my life that might be fueling this anger? And the good news is, if you can't figure it out, you can ask somebody else, because they can probably help you with that. It might be a neighbor or maybe a family member. And if not, and if you want to just kind of deal with it in private, get a good therapist and figure out why you are angry, what's the root cause, and what are some of the techniques that are going to help you to choose healthier ways to deal with that anger. So H is hungry, A is angry, L is lonely. We live in a world that's so lonely. I see people on their phones all the time, and I think they're all going to have carpal tunnel syndrome from doing this. And they think they have friends. Like, they even call it a friend. They say, friend me. Those aren't your friends. Those are just bots, or people that maybe aren't telling you the truth. They're people that are probably lonely too, but that connection isn't going to be enough. And so I always say, if you're lonely, the best thing you can do is go and find someone who's lonelier than you are, and you solve two problems. And I remember one time I had a very young immigrant client, and he had come from a hot country to Alberta. Now, if any of you don't know much about Alberta, we can hit 30 below quite easily. Well, he didn't know that. And he had a job working outside, and he took his gloves off, and he was trying to repair something. And he had permanent damage. His thumbs and his fingers were so fat, and he could never use them again. And so the occupational therapist and surgeon arranged for him to have gloves, and he had to walk around like this. And the pain was so horrible, and he had no mobility. And he would come into my office, and he'd say, I'm useless. I have no purpose. Here I am, a young man, and I lie in bed, and I watch my wife get out of bed and go and work to try to support us. And I see my children go to school, and I sit and I stare at the wall, just thinking I have nothing to offer. And so I said to him, is there a nursing home near you? And of course, this man was in his 30s, so he gave me a look like, are you crazy? Like, I'm not ready for the nursing home. And I said, no. I just want you to go there and walk in. But he said, I don't know anybody there. And I said, it doesn't matter. Just do it. It'll give you something to do. So he went to the nursing home. He was obedient, very good man. And he went in the first time, and he was so surprised because there was a man that he used to work with. And so he talked to that man, and the man was so glad to see him. And he looked around, and he said it just hurt his heart because there were all these people in wheelchairs and at tables and on chairs sitting alone, and there were no visitors. So he decided a couple of those days to go back. He went back, and there were all these people greeting him as though he was their visitor. And he started to realize how important just walking into that nursing home was for them and for him. They looked forward to his visit. He put a smile on their face, but he also felt that he had a purpose and that he had value that he could share with other people. So if you're feeling lonely, don't sit at home and stare at the wall and have a pity party. Go somewhere. Just go somewhere. And it might just be a case of, when we go in the elevator and we all stand like this and everybody's looking at the numbers. I usually just say something like, thanks for coming out today. And all of a sudden you notice the whole atmosphere in the elevator changes and everybody starts laughing and saying, oh yeah, isn't it a good day? So you can make a difference in the world, but you can't dwell on your own issues in order to do it. It's about reaching out. So we've got hungry, angry, lonely, and of course the last one is tired. None of us do very well if we're tired. Our bodies and our brains need to be recharged. And I'm not going to go into all of that, Jeff, today, because that could be a whole seminar on how to get to sleep and how to sleep without nightmares and that. But if you have enough rest, then you can be your best self. And so today I'm just going to encourage each one of you, when you're feeling kind of off, don't reach for something that's going to give you a temporary fix. Have a conversation with yourself and say, what's going on in my brain and my body? Am I hungry? Then I better get something to eat. Am I angry? Better get to the bottom of that one. Am I lonely? Who can I help that's also lonely? And am I tired? Because maybe I just need a nap.
I like that. Halt. I have all those issues too. I can relate to all that. And that's something you have to do every day.
Exactly.
You can't just do that one day and think that that's going to be the end all. Thank you.
Yeah. I think that people know their computers more than they know themselves.
I'm thinking about that one.
Okay.
I think I'm working on both.
Okay.
Yeah. What do you see as the ideal environment to treat substance abuse disorders?
Well, I don't really think there is an ideal environment because we're all unique. Each one of us is different, and we all react to different things, and we all got into problems different ways. So there's different solutions for different people, and that's kind of tricky because you have to kind of figure you out so you know which is the best. I'm just gonna tell you one quick thing, if you don't mind, about when I do assessment, and I don't care whether we're talking about your mechanic for your vehicle or your hairdresser or your therapist, but there's 5 steps. There are 5 steps, okay? So the first step is intake. Like if you go to do an intake at a treatment center or something, they ask you certain questions to see if it's a suitable place for you. My sister lived in a nursing home and it was called Deer Lodge. And people would phone all the time and ask when hunting season was. Because they thought Deer Lodge was a hunting lodge. Okay, so the first thing is when you're going to do something or you're going to a treatment center, you have to make sure it's the right fit. Okay. The second one is where everybody makes mistakes. Everybody. It's assessment. To get enough information. Most people just jump right over here to intervention. And they say, oh, well, you need this, you need this, you need this. And they don't even know why. And I mean, I think of a little story that I could tell you when I was working in a school, and the vice principal came and he said, there's a man here, a boy, and he's been here 3 days and he won't cooperate, and he wears a hoodie and he just sits there and stares and he won't pick up a pen, he won't do anything. Will you talk to him? And so I said, I'll try. Well, they brought this boy in and he sat there with his head down, and I said, I work in this school, but they make me do homework. Can you help me do my homework? And he kind of looked at me like, all right. And so I got a paper and I started to draw a genogram, a map of his family. And then I looked like this underneath. And I know we're not supposed to be racist, but you have to know a person's culture to kind of understand who they are or where they came from. And I looked and I noticed his skin was a little darker. And of course, in Canada, we have a lot of Native Indians or Aboriginal people here, Indigenous. And I said, are you Native? And he said, Filipino. And I said, Mabuhay. Now, that's the only word I know in their language. I know one word, but it means, it's kind of like aloha in Hawaii. So what it means is hello, goodbye, bless you, we're connected. It's sort of an all-purpose word. And I just said Mabuhay. And the boy looked up at me and he said, you know my people. That one word connected us. And I said, what's going on with you? Why are you so angry? And he said, my grandpa died 3 days ago, and my dad didn't let me go to the funeral, and he dumped me in this new school. His problem wasn't anger. His problem was the circumstances, and he didn't know how to cope with it. And obviously his family didn't know how to cope with it. So number 2 is assessment, to gather enough information. And then number 3 is to tie an intervention to it. Once you know what the problem is and you figure out exactly what the factors are, then you can tie an intervention. And then the next one is to evaluate. So you have to say, how are we doing? I could say that right now, Jeff. How are we doing? We're into the intervention. How are we doing? So you do a check-in. And then the fifth one is to refer. Or sometimes we're not enough for another person. So then we have to say, well, you know what? This might work for you. Or have you tried HALT? Or have you made your bed and dressed up for you? Because maybe you'll feel a little better. So I don't think there is one thing, but you have to go through those 5 steps. And treatment centers often don't do that. They have such a rigid pattern of doing things that the person walks in, they're scared, and they don't feel heard because they're just filling out paperwork or giving tombstone data is what I call it, like your birth date, your family history and that. So if you're going to treatment in a group home or in an inpatient setting, there's some wonderful pluses to it if you got the right one. The bad part is you've been in this 24-hour bubble where you're safe and you can say anything you want because you don't know anybody. And you've got professionals there and they can help you. But then you go home to the same risky environment you were in before, and you haven't had a chance to practice. There's no internship for when you're in recovery other than just facing life.
Yes.
And we say that, experience is what you wish was happening to the other guy. So now you've been in this safe bubble for, say, 28 days or longer, and you feel on top of the world and you can conquer this, and then you go home. And now all of a sudden, everything changed. Everything changed. Because now you're used to going to the bar Friday night to drink with your buddies. So you've not only lost your drinking, you've lost your Friday night activity, you've lost the environment and you've lost your friends because they're still drinking. So group can be good, but you have to know, what happens after. Inpatient, but you have to know what happens after. Now, group therapy can be great. I love group therapy because you're never alone. There's always lots of people in the group, and you're never the worst one. There's always somebody in the group that's going through a tougher time than you are, right? And so it gives you a chance to be in a safe place where some days you can be the worst person and some days you can help the worst person. Or I don't mean the worst person, the person who's in the worst situation that week, right? So group therapy is good. Now, family therapy can be really good. The only problem with that is you've probably been in a dysfunctional pattern for so long that if you start getting better, you might tick off your family. Because your family is used to having you sick or unreliable, undependable. And so they don't know how to handle that. And that might actually raise conflict between family members. When you get in there, you're going to actually start talking about the issues instead of going around and all playing this game. Okay, individual therapy. Now, individual can be expensive. And I'm not sure what your program offers there, but I know in Canada, we're not covered as psychologists. So somebody who comes to see me has to have an insurance plan or be tied in with Veterans Affairs or something like that. So it can be expensive, but also it can be difficult to access. And sometimes I think it's absolutely goofy, but we have a treatment program here in Alberta where you can't get in unless you're high. You have to be.
That happens in the United States too.
Yeah.
This is dysfunctional.
Yeah.
This is what I want to. It makes no common sense whatsoever.
No. And
You
individual
stayed sober for a day, so you can't come get treatment now.
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense.
Well, I had a homeless couple one time, and we have a pierogi factory in Alberta, and I remember them saying that they had to be high to get into the overnight, like to sleep on mats. And so he would work at the pierogi factory all day long in order to get enough money to get high so they had a place to sleep at night.
Yeah, see, no.
Yeah. So anyway, so individual therapy can be expensive, but sometimes you can get free services through mental health or through an addiction program or whatever, if there's enough room. You might be on a wait list for a long time, and if you try to go cold turkey,
Mhm.
that can be pretty cruel.
Mhm.
So those are different types of therapy. And I mean, self-therapy is very noble, but it's not very easy to do.
No. It most certainly is not easy to do on your own.
No.
Um, uh, okay. So we were kind of talking about this, but what are the most significant barriers people face in early recovery? Um,
Well, when you first start, you're going to lose a lot. Like I mentioned, you're going to lose your Friday night activity, or you're going to lose your buddies, your drinking buddies. You know, you know Blake Shelton? I love his song, Blake Shelton. If you watch the video, he says, "When I drink one, I drink 13." Yeah, and I become a real dancing machine. that video, that video is actually in a bar, and he sings about, that's his environment. And then they just drink until they get in a fight over some woman, and then the police come. It's quite an interesting video, and I often play it to people that have been drinking, and they say, "That's me. I become a real dancing machine." Yeah. So sometimes you have to lose your environment. You lose your friends. Often you lose the secret. Sometimes you're a secret drinker. Some people say, "I just drink alone. Nobody ever sees me drinking." So now all of a sudden you're exposed. And I mean, now we class alcoholism, or we don't even call it that anymore. We keep changing names, but
right.
it's all the same problem, same thing. But sometimes what happens is it's substance abuse or substance addiction or substance dependence. Okay, so now you are exposed to the world, and we used to treat that as like you're just weak and just make a better choice and pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Now we realize it's an illness. And so you can get like benefits usually, like because it's an illness, but then you've got to admit it to your employer.
Hmm.
And once you're not going to work, now all the staff know. And then people start saying, "Well, where were you? You were gone. Were you in Hawaii?" Well, not many people want to say I was in treatment, because
Hmm.
see, guilt is when you think you made a mistake, and shame is when you think you are a mistake. And often people that go to treatment think they are a mistake. And so when you're in early recovery, it can affect your every part of your life. Now the secret is out. And people that don't have much compassion or understanding can point and say, "Well, he's a drunk." And then all of a sudden it doesn't feel comfortable to go back to that job and go back to work. Or you're dealing with HR and you're having to fill out forms. So I think one of the hardest things in early recovery is the secret is out. The world all of a sudden knows that you are not Superman or even close in their mind, okay? And so there's stigma, and everything changes. And that can be really, really scary. And let's go back to the beginning, because remember, Jeff, I said, sometimes alcohol is not the problem, it's the solution to solving problems you can't cope with. So now if your scariness or your fear rises, you're more tempted to take that temporary solution in order to calm yourself down or escape. So it's a cycle. If you can't handle the emotions, you got a problem. You take the drink, or you take the drug, or whatever it is, or you gamble, or you start hoarding, or you have relationships or whatever. Now you got another problem. So they feed on each other. So starting out is facing loss and facing fear.
Wow. You've got me thinking about lots of things.
Okay.
What are the most significant obstacles people face in maintaining sobriety? Because there you just kind of mentioned the cycle.
Yeah.
So if that fear, like I just got out of rehab, and I'm back to work, and you feel judged, and you might end up just relapsing.
or judging yourself. Yes, I think one of the biggest problems in maintaining sobriety is that you think you've got it licked. So it's not like measles. Okay, I'm done. I've done my 2 weeks in isolation. I'm good now. I can go out and golf and just have a couple of beers. I can manage this because I've been through treatment. And by the way, you're my family and you don't understand. I don't have any problems anymore because I'm not drinking, even though I might not be a nice person.
Uh-huh.
You know, dry drunk is when you, I'm a lady and I'm a professional, but I'm going to say something that's not very professional, okay?
Okay.
If you have an asshole that drinks and you take the drink away,
Still an asshole.
right, and
Yeah.
that's dry drunk. That's dry drunk, okay? And forgive me, I didn't mean to offend anyone, but you've all probably used that word at some time. So the thing is that if you have maintained your sobriety for 30 days or 28 days or whatever, you think you got it licked. And then you come out and you start telling everybody else how successful you are, and they don't really believe you. Because victims, first of all, they think it's not going to change. And then when it changes, they think, well, it's not going to last. So you don't have the support you thought you had in the first place.
Right.
And then you've got this ego that says, well, I got this thing licked and I can go out and I can control. I can manage my drinking. Good luck with that. You probably won't. And I'm not trying to be negative about it, but it's so easy to slip when we're arrogant. You know, when we think that, what do they say? Pride goes before a fall. When we think we've got it together, often what happens is we're just being tricked by our own thoughts and that we can't control things. Okay. And so often we don't see how our choices and our behaviors have contributed to the problem. And then sometimes we put the blame on the person who has the addiction, rather than saying, well, you know what, maybe I wasn't a very good support to you, or maybe I wasn't, you know, very positive about the fact that you were dealing with this, or maybe I shouldn't have brought up all those old stories again. So, but it's your fault because you're the addict. So I think sometimes there's a transition between drinking and getting sober long term. There's a lot of adjustments to do in there. I just talked to a fellow yesterday and he had been in rehab in and out for over 2 years. And he hadn't been drinking for 30 years. And then all of a sudden, yeah, his wife got breast cancer and he started drinking again. So after 30 years, he was drinking and he was in and out of rehab for 2 years. And yesterday when I was talking with him, I was telling him about that I was going to do this interview with you. Mm-hmm. And he said, is it on Zoom? And I said, yes. And he said, oh my gosh, I just got triggered. And I said, what did I say? What did I say? And he said, no, I triggered myself. And I said, what do you mean? Well, he said, the last time I was on Zoom, I was on an AA meeting and I was stone drunk. I was drunk as could be on Zoom at an AA meeting. Mm-hmm. You know, sometimes we try. He was trying.
Right.
Right. So I think sometimes you have to just stop and think, don't blame the victim and don't try to blame yourself. Let's just do that one day at a time. Remember how we talk about one day at a time? And I said, try to have a good day. Don't think about all the past, or, well, what if he drinks again? Or what if she starts shopping? Or what if today? Get up, get out of bed, make your bed, do your grooming, dress up for you, eat nutritiously, go through the self-care and focus on today.
I have one more question.
Okay.
Because this is kind of goes with the way I want to build in the future. How do you think our current medical and social services system benefit people seeking treatment for substance abuse disorders? And how do you think some of these systems create barriers?
Well, nothing's perfect. And remember, I'm Canadian. And I often hear people say, oh, I wouldn't want to live in Canada. It's socialist, you know. And then I hear Canadians say, I wouldn't want the U.S. system. Nothing is perfect. It doesn't matter where you live, okay?
Mhm.
We live in a world where there's usually not enough money, there's not enough staff, there might not be enough programs. And I feel really sad for the caregivers, for the professionals who are working in the treatment program, because so often what's happening is that they have more stress than ever, especially since COVID happened and there was so little staff. Often you have to remember some of them have addiction. Some of them have mental health issues. And now all of a sudden they've got more pressure because they have more clients and more files, and they don't know how to keep up. And then they either break down or blow up.
Mm.
So we have to have some empathy for the staffing and for the programs. Okay, sometimes we think what are treatment options that are appropriate, they're not appropriate for the person, because remember I said each one of us is unique. Each of us is unique. I remember being in San Francisco right after September 11th, and I was down on the wharf, and I saw this big black vehicle drive up, and the TV vans were there, and I thought, oh, it's Whoopi Goldberg or somebody important. And out jumped this little fellow with a bright yellow jacket, a leather jacket, and I thought, that's Willie Brown. Willie Brown was the mayor. And I went over to his, and I knew who he was because I'm kind of a history geek. So I went over to his bodyguard and I said, that's Willie Brown, isn't it? And he said, yeah, it is. And I said, does he do autographs? And he says, oh, yeah, but you have to wait till he's done his interview. And here was the journalist with a microphone in his face condemning him because there were so many homeless that were sleeping in the street the night before. And I'll never forget what Willie Brown said. He said, we don't have a homeless problem. We have a allocation problem. We had 80 empty beds last night, and we couldn't get the people off the street into the bed. Yeah. And so then afterwards, I went up and I talked with Willie for a bit, and I said, will you do an autograph? And he said, thank you for coming. Nobody was flying back then because they were all so afraid. See, fear can rule our world globally and individually. That's sometimes what the problem is we don't match the person with the right program, or we don't know how to get people into the program that's already set up, or we assume that the program is going to be one size fits all. So I think sometimes what we need to think about is not just the options, but how to connect them. It's not always a distribution problem. It can be an allocation problem. Also, effective treatment is often based on relationship between the caregiver and the client. If you don't have good rapport with your therapist, you're not going to trust them. You're not going to make progress. I'm very privileged and very blessed because I had a representative of Veterans Affairs call me one day, and she says, I just want to tell you that every single client I talk to of yours say they love you and you're so helpful to them. And I went, yes. And she said, we're not used to hearing that. Isn't that sad? Isn't that sad? So if you don't have a relationship that works with your therapist and you're not feeling that you can trust them, you're not going to make progress. And now you want to find a different therapist or a different program, and it might not be readily available. And in between, you think, I'll just have a drink. And so, like I said, every person's unique. You need unique solutions. And you also have to remember that you are not your addiction. You are you. Your addiction is a choice. And it's a bad choice you made that you need to deal with. And I've worked a lot with eating disorders too. And sometimes what happens, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, Jeff, but I've had women who have an eating disorder and they actually name it. And then when they're in trouble, they talk to it. So you might say, for example, Jeff, if you had an addiction, you might call it Harry. And then instead of saying, oh, I'm a mess, or this is terrible, instead you say, you know what, Harry's a mess today. We need to help Harry out. So sometimes it's good to actually name your addiction and then address it like you would a friend or someone else. So finally today, if I could, I'd just like to address the name of your company and your tagline, because you call it Soulful Recovery. And so I looked it up in Collins Dictionary. I wanted to know what the word soulful meant. And it said, something that is soulful expresses deep feelings, especially sadness or love. And you know, deep down inside, I think every one of us has a strong desire to be loved. And we wander around, and sometimes that desire isn't filled. We all have potential to give and receive to other people, but in order to do so, we have to get our own act together. And we have to learn how to, I know you're not going to want to hear this, you've heard it a million times, but you have to love yourself first. You have to learn to love yourself. And Harry, maybe. You have to treat Harry with some respect. So I tell each person that each of us is like a glass of water. So imagine that you're walking around and inside you've got this toxic water. And it's just like, ugh, yucky, and you haven't dealt with anything, and you're upset, and you've got angst, and you're angry and that. And then you walk past somebody and you splash on them. They're going to get burnt. They're going to get burnt, and they're going to pull away from you. Now imagine that you get your act together and you clean up the inside so it's not toxic. Imagine that all of a sudden you've got fresh, pure spring water. You've forgiven yourself. You've forgiven others. You know, you've made some good choices and you've got some healthy pride. Now you go past somebody and you splash on them and they go, that was refreshing. That was refreshing. So you need to clean up your act. And my encouragement today is that each one of us could be filled with fresh, clean water. And that water consists of self-respect, honesty, and love. And so then one step at a time, we can go through this hurting and mixed up world and we can start splashing on people. And I believe that each one of us can do that one day at a time. And I just want to add one little thing if I could, Jeff. You mentioned I have over 12,000 articles on my website. There's only about 1,200. But thank you for thinking big.
Well, maybe, well, I didn't have any glasses on.
That's okay. So if you want to go to my website, though, they're all free and they are all published articles. They're divided up. I have two grandsons that actually work for me, and one of them does my website, and he's got them divided by category. So if you're having trouble with finances, you can click on that, or relationships or anxiety, you can click on the different topics. And they're about 500 words because that's what my newspaper editors require. And so they're printable. And so I often use them as handouts for people. And so I just want to thank you again. I hope this has been helpful for you. And I know it's been helpful to me because it reminds me also of the things that I need to do in my own life in order to be well. Because remember, I see 33 veterans and they all have PTSD. So some days it's like herding cats. And I know that if I'm not clean inside and I don't have that fresh, clean water to splash on them and to offer them hope, it's not going to work. And I don't know if you're familiar with David Letterman. He used to have a talk show.
Yes.
And I'm like David Letterman. I always think if I don't have a good time, it wasn't a good show. That's how we need to go around in life. We need to have a good time and keep it clean. And then we know it's a good show and we know others will be blessed because we just showed up.
I love it. And that's my mission, and that's what I'm doing. Is showing up for the other people. So I picked soulful recovery. I had a lot of alone time. God gets you alone. And I've been working on the soul because some of those things, those reasons that I drank, those reasons that I got in the situations that I did, but they stem from kind of deep wounds, I think, from the past. I know from the past.
Exactly.
And actually, I think, and so now I know I'm in a position that I can give back and help others get out of that darkness that I was in when I felt like I'd never stop drinking.
Yeah.
But God blessed me on that one. And 5 years later, I'm here and sober, and
Good job.
back.
Good job.
And
One day at a time, Jeff. One day at a time for all of us.
so happy to have had the privilege to speak to you, and I look forward to speaking with you again at some point in time in our endeavor to help others.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.